This is the Leadership Podcast, and we study leaders. This is episode 468, featuring Jim and Jan talking about the power of doing nothing. Thank you for joining us today. This is Javas Lopez, founder of Rafty Advisors, and this is the Leadership Podcast.
Hey everybody, Jan Rutherford, founder of Self-Reliant Leadership. Thanks for making us part of your day as we study leaders. And as Jim said, episode 468, meaning 467 episodes are at theleadershippodcast.com.
Yeah. And our episode today is brought to you by Darley. They are definitely a company that does a lot. They support our first responders in the military with best-in-class pumps, equipment, and defense assets. You can learn more about them at darley.com. That's DARLEY.com. Darley, you serve others, we serve you.
All right, Jim, this is going to be a good one. So you've been on 3 crucibles. What's the number one takeaway from every crucible? You have to
unplug and,
Right.
you have to, find some solitude and, really kind of think deeply and just not have the outside external distractions. I think there is, a lot of time to do nothing and just kind of check and unplug.
And finish this sentence. You have to slow down to
Speed up.
Right. That's a takeaway. So let me tell a story. So I'm Sunday. It snowed here in Denver. It's Thursday through Saturday. We had about ankle deep snow. On Sunday morning, I went up. There's a 1 mile mountain up. It's 1,000 feet. It's nice and steep. And especially in snows, you need trekking poles. And I was hiking up there, and it's a little under 30 minutes to get up there and about 20 minutes to come down. Anyway, I went up there, and about halfway up, I started thinking, what am I supposed to be thinking about? What am I supposed to solve or figure out or whatever? And I literally didn't have a plan. And I never in the wilderness hike with headphones. I don't listen to podcast music because I feel like I need to be aware.
Yeah.
So I'm hiking along, and I'm like, I don't have an objective. Nothing new. And my mind started going like crazy. And it was like a 1985 MTV video, super fast, all this. And I was going through childhood stuff and this and that, like not trauma or anything. My mind went 1,000 places. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting. Not unusual. And then I started thinking about, my weekly newsletter I put out. I'm like, gosh, the power of doing nothing. We all say we need, and Dan Pink had something out recently, and maybe that triggered it. The Einstein, Da Vinci, a lot of these people would, Einstein would go sit in a rowboat in the middle of the pond and do nothing. And I thought about how powerful it is for me. Some people can sit. I can't sit. My doing nothing is moving.
Mm-hmm.
And, I came back and I felt great. And I thought, I figured some stuff out about, doing nothing, and that it really is important. And it kind of ties in. We're going to interview General McChrystal, and I started reading his book, and there's a great math equation right in the very beginning. And we're going to ask Stan about this.
Great book.
And he defined character as conviction times discipline. And I think it's a great equation because like what you believe in, what you value, what's important to you, your priorities are great if met with discipline to execute them. But if you have the wrong convictions and you have a lot of discipline, then that can be a mess. But I thought about character. It's not just character. That could be outcomes, results, output, anything. Are you thinking the right stuff? Have you decided you're going in the right direction and then apply the discipline, or are you just busy? And I'll finish up by saying this. Somebody I was coaching today said, the pressure's on. Based on an earning call and everything that's going, the pressure's on. Well, what do you think most people are going to do when they hear the pressure's on from the boss? Let's get busy.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do something. Instead of taking a step back and go, what are the right questions we need to be asking?
Mm-hmm.
So, when we say do nothing, I think there's really value in the do nothing, but at some point your mind's going to come back and start going, well, what am I going to do? I'm doing nothing now, but eventually I'm going to do something. What's the right thing to do? I've got X amount of hours in the day. Where do I spend those? And how do I, engage in those from a discipline perspective to actually move things in the way that I want to move them. So again, if you're busy all the time, you have no sense of taking a step back and basically saying, am I even working on the right stuff?
I can't remember exactly the Abraham Lincoln quote, but they said if you've got, let's say, 6 hours to chop down a tree, he said, I'm going to spend 3 hours sharpening my axe. And I think the reality is a lot of times we, it's not necessarily do nothing, but it's like spend some time thinking, spend some time aiming before you shoot. I think we're
Right.
so anxious to take action and do things instead of think about things. To step back and talk about like McChrystal's formula, the one thing I like about it, because I think that a lot of people talk about like so your values and your, what you hold dear, and then they talk about discipline. But most people, when you speak with them, they don't connect the two. Okay. They'll be like, I've got values that I hold dear in my heart. Then they'll be like, and I'm disciplined. I run marathons. I do this. I do that. But it's not the discipline on holding dear and firm and consistent with your values. And so I think the connection there is what's really critical. And that's why I think connecting kind of your understanding to any problem or task you've got in front of you is to just say, let me put some value on my understanding of the situation first before I jump to conclusions. If you take a look at so many of the missteps we can observe from leaders, it's by jumping to conclusions. And it's like straight out of the movie Office Space. I mean, I kind of have to laugh, jump to conclusions. But the reality is, take a moment, take a step back, understand the problem, kind of peel back the layers. Honestly, that's like all I talk about in my book, but that's, I think, the process that helps you put an absolutely smaller amount of effort to get to your solution. Because, once again, I'll say like, I never want to work any harder than I have to. I'm always going to put the minimum amount of work effort to achieve a result. But 90% of that work is figuring out like where to apply the pressure, where to tackle the issue instead of just like brute forcing everything.
Yeah. I always say to my most senior executives I coach, you should have a think list, not a to-do list.
Mhm.
Let me ask you this, Jim. I told you my story of doing nothing. No surprise to you that in order to do nothing, I need to be moving. I mean, that's me doing nothing. And again, my best place for doing nothing, for thinking is, either being in the woods or being out on a walk or run, something before the sun comes up. Like when I like own the neighborhood. What's a story from you about, I mean, what's the way you do nothing and have that time to think and undistracted and all?
I'll get to the tactical part, but I want to talk about maybe a couple different instances in my life where, very intentionally stepping back and not driving after something. I mean, like I'm an A personality. I go after stuff. I go after it with a lot of energy. So I'm not going to say I'm one of these guys that like is always doing things right. But at a young age, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Okay. I knew I wanted to have my own business. I knew it's like, I'm working for the man's probably not going to work out for me, even though I was pretty good at it.
And your dad was an entrepreneur.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So that didn't hurt.
And it doesn't hurt. And quite honestly, I'm not the kind of guy that fits in a box. Like you give me a lot of rules, I'm be like, yeah, I'm not following most of those. And so I'm going to find a different way to do things. And I tried like 10 different things. I was like, how about this? How about this? I was, real estate, this, that. I was trying all kinds of different stuff. And, I probably could have made money in a lot of them. I mean, I figured out ways to make money, but none of them I loved. I took a step back. I said, I'm just thrashing. I'm not finding anything. And I said, I'm just going to take a step back, know that I want this thing to happen, but just take a step back and like wait for it to come to me. And, when I see it, I'll know it. Okay. And I think that served me exceptionally well because when I did that, when I stepped away, I was more open to seeing things. And, people will say, oh, you got lucky. Your timing was great, this and that, and I got really, some people say lucky with the timing of the internet and all kinds of other things that happened. But the reality is if I was busy thrashing, I never would have seen the opportunity in front of me. I was calm enough to be able to see things happening, connect a few dots and go, holy cow, this is it. I'm going to jump on this really early. And I'll tell you, the same thing happened when I was kind of dating and I was, trying to find, the love of my life and, dating lots of different girls. And it was like, had my fun, but wasn't finding the one. I intentionally just said, I'm going to stop looking. I'm just going to stop looking. I'm going to go out there, do my thing. I'm going to stop looking. She'll show up. I'll find her. And lo and behold, it didn't take long. That's what happened. And what the reason I think those two stories are important is because I think it's not about doing nothing. It's about quieting your mind so you can open your ears and your eyes to see things that were already there.
Yeah.
Okay. Most of these things were already there, but you can't see them because you're laser focused on something. You're looking through a keyhole and you're not seeing the world around you, or you're not moving slow enough to see what's already there. And I think that's the importance of slowing down and perhaps, doing what we're saying, do nothing.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, our sponsor, Darley, they support first responders and military. And again, when they're in action, they're in action. But I'm pretty sure, I know from a military perspective, I'm pretty sure from a first responder perspective, there's a lot of time they're doing nothing, but they are doing something. And Darley helps those folks do that. And again, they're our sponsor, and you can learn more about them at darley.com. So Jim, this whole idea of doing nothing, again, for the people listening, our audience, the pressure's on. Right now, it's that time when people are like, are we in a recession? We know people, my barber today told me, hey, a lot of my clients are laid off. They're on the market. And she's made this comment. I shouldn't laugh. It's just interesting. She said, most of the people are laid off. They've been laid off a bunch of times. And I said, what's sad about that is everybody I know that's looking to hire somebody right now will not hire anybody that's unemployed. They want to hire somebody that's at a company and they want to poach. And, the whole thing is, everybody that's either been fired, terminated, laid off, or might be soon, how much of their time, again, they're busy, the pressure's on, but in some ways they need to do nothing. Go to tea, go to have a beer, get a coffee, talk to people, build relationships. That's going to feel like doing nothing. But in my mind, that is everybody, unless you're an entrepreneur, that is your only insurance policy should something happen. And, if we're always busy, and I remember somebody early in my career stopped me in the hall and said, what the hell are you doing? I said, what do you mean? He goes, every time you're in the hall, like with a clipboard, where you at with this and this, and it's all business. And they're like, you don't come and get coffee in the cafeteria. I'm like, I don't drink coffee. Where are you at lunch? I go running at lunch. And he's like, you need to build relationships with people here.
Mhm.
It's not all about work all the time. And I remember thinking, man, are you crazy? I get lots of stuff done. I've been promoted. And I was young. I didn't understand what this person was saying and how important that feedback was, but I took his advice. And about a year later, somebody said, hey, talk to Jan. He's like the best networker ever. I'm like, what? I became a good networker? And it was that one guy pulling me aside in the hallway going, you're a knucklehead, you know? But, again, I thought the secret was just to be, super productive every second of every day. Yeah. Gosh, as soon as I get home at night, I'm going to journal, and then I'm going to, and it's like, really slowing down and figuring out what's important. I don't know if you've had this, Jim, but, most of the people, well, everybody I coach is younger than me. And sometimes they'll say, hey, hey, what did you learn when you turned 40? What did you learn when you turned 50? What did you learn when you turned 60? And I have answers to all those. And it's interesting because a lot of it really is, a lot of the crap I thought was important
Not
isn't,
important.
isn't, and, I mean, that comes with age, but what was somebody saying the other day? I don't have time to make all the mistakes I need to make, so I need to learn from other people.
Mhm.
And, I think that's another thing that's really important is, you and I talked to a lot of veterans that are transitioning. I talked to one yesterday, and I got his whole resume. We had 20 minutes to talk. I got his whole resume, and it was like, um, I don't need your resume to help you, but for me to help you, it would be really ideal if you asked really good questions. If you thought about this ahead of time, that you did nothing to think about, well, how can I move from where I am to where I need to be? How can I learn from this guy's many, 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 many mistakes?
Yeah. When veterans used to come to me and they'd be like, hey, I just want to give back and help other people. And I'm like, hey, focus on yourself for a little while. Put your oxygen mask on. Focus on yourself. And
Yeah.
I said, don't worry about helping everyone else right now. You've been a giver for a long time. Go ahead and be selfish for a little while and help yourself. But then a little later on, I kind of figured there is some value in helping other people
Yeah.
while you're trying to solicit help for yourself. And it's twofold. One of them is it puts you in a better mood. Gets you a little bit, lifts your spirits, puts you in a better mood. But I think the problem is when you try and help other people, okay, you realize what it is that you need to help someone else. So
Yeah.
it makes you better at providing what you need to get help. So when someone gives you their resume, you're like, you're not giving me anything I can help you with. Okay. Now I might stop someone. I might be like, hey, tell me about this. Tell me about this. I really don't care about that. I care about this instead. But I think when some of these, veterans help other people, they learn that like, hey, your life story doesn't help me. Tell me what you're interested in. Tell me about your family. Tell me about what's going on in your life. And I think that can be helpful. But in the grand scheme of things, I think people don't identify the problem well before they
Yeah.
start throwing solutions at it. And it just gets that simple. And sometimes I think, just that solitude or reflection or even time to say, to stop before even in a meeting, just say, what is the problem we're trying to solve here? And just take a step back and let everyone just write it down. Write down what you think the problem is we're trying to solve here. And you're going to get 10 different answers. And there's no way you're going to be operated as a team if you're not all trying to row in the same direction to solve the same problem. And most of the time, you could go in a room full of 10 people, write down the problem. And my guess is you might not even hit the mark once as to what the real problem is. And that is the key to not only effective leadership, but like, something we talk a lot about is sales.
Yeah.
Sales is about solving problems, and good salespeople tend to be good at dialing into the problem pretty quick.
As you're talking, I'm going back to my notes, and I've taken very few notes over the last 9 years based on podcast guests. I mean, we're listening, we're talking, we're trying to figure out what question we're going to ask. And, about a month ago, we had Pippa Begg on the show.
Mhm.
And when this airs, Pippa's will have aired before ours. So if you haven't listened to that episode, you need to. But I wrote down, problems that she's seeing: inability to focus. Well, what solves that?
Mhm.
Spending some time quiet. Quality of critical thinking. Communication. The big takeaway I remember from her was, went back to what's so simple and so hard is constantly asking, are we asking the right questions?
Yeah.
Are these the right questions? I spent time yesterday with a guy, a young man that I've known since he was a little kid, and really great soul. And I asked him if I could give him some unsolicited feedback, and he said, yeah. And I said, let's talk about focus. And, really taking a step back. And it just reminds me, of early days in the Army when you learned to shoot in azimuth.
Mhm.
For those that don't know what that means, basically take your compass and figure out the direction so that you can go from point A to point B, the azimuth, whether it's 270 degrees or 186 degrees. But a lot of times you had to really take time to figure out, well, that's the magnetic direction. What's true north? What's the declination diagram? So I need to adjust. But if you were off just a little bit and you were going 100 meters, not a big deal. If you were off and you were going 3 miles, you were way off. So smart people basically really took their time to make sure I have the right azimuth. And I think in life, in all aspects of our life, personal life, professional life, I think, not only do we need to make sure we shoot the right azimuth at the beginning, but to make course corrections along the way. Because, you might shoot the azimuth and go, well, I can't see 3 miles and go to that tree. I can see 100 meters. And if I go to that tree, then I shoot the azimuth again, and then I go to the next tree. And that's, akin to setting milestones, in all aspects of our life. And I think I'm really glad that I learned about that, that, to really think about taking the time to shoot the right azimuth, whether it be for family, faith, finances, fitness, fulfillment. Um, and what's always going to come back when you look at those things, when you're quiet time and you're thinking, is always there's going to be, especially early in your career, this 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 voice about time and money.
Yeah.
I
Well,
want to do these things, and I want to spend time with my family. I want to have options. I want to make X amount of money. And the things that don't make sense is I want to make $350,000 a year and work 30 hours a week as a 35-year-old. That's just it's not gonna happen. And so you have to figure out, what do I value more? Right now, this year, in the next 3 years, where do I want to be? What sacrifices am I going to need to make? And how do I apply discipline to those sacrifices so I can achieve short, medium, and long-term objectives?
yeah. Well, I think when we think about, let's say, leadership and we think about alignment, and let's say alignment is akin to setting your azimuth and setting your direction and your goal. I think a lot of times we think about it as this one-time event where I go in and I determine what direction I'm going to go. And
Yeah.
I'm going to set that course and I'm going to communicate it to my team and say, okay, you guys know where we're going. Here's where we're going. Let's go. I think that is such a simplistic and foolish understanding of alignment. Alignment is all about feedback. Alignment is all about, not only just getting feedback, but, actively measuring, continuously measuring so you know you're on track. And, you may need to change. Things may need to adjust. What you think is the right course for you in your career at 30 is not the same at 35 or 45. And and it's not the same after, you have a kid or if you get sick. And so constantly kind of reassessing and remeasuring is really the key to alignment, because alignment isn't a static thing that happened once. And that's where I think people get that concept wrong. And from a leadership perspective, it's absolutely devastating and terrible. It's as bad as a carpenter, kind of measuring, once, but repeating the mistake 1,000 times, and then all of a sudden you got a pile of wood and it's all the wrong, measurement. I just think that people have a false understanding of the importance of constant feedback, constant reassessment, constant adjustment. There is very little that is so set in stone that it's like, I've decided this once and it will never change again. Heck, most people's opinions are set in stone these days. I think we should hold them a little more lightly and be really open to what other people have to say. But, that is a mindset that I think is tough to achieve. But I would argue impossible to achieve if you don't step back and do nothing and assess every once in a while. And it's pretty cool.
I'm going to hopefully tie a bow on this. I think from my perspective, you use the word adjustment, and I would say, well, that's constant adaptability.
Mhm.
No organization is going to say, hey, we're going to do this transformation one time and then nothing will change, or we're going to do this change thing. And I was just talking to someone today and they're like, hey, this person, we just did a structure, this person's having a big problem with it. Like, you need to this person needs to get on board. Like, you better adapt, or and you better adapt and have a good attitude about it, like non-negotiable. But tying the bow on it is Margaret Heffernan, who came back right after the pandemic and said, hey, we've been efficient, now we need to be adaptive. And your point about being lazy, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's about being really efficient. That's not about like, hey, I'm lazy. Like, no, you get a lot done in the least amount of time with the least amount of effort. I mean, that's human nature. I mean, if the candy's on the ground, you're going to get that versus climb a 20-foot tree and get the candy. I mean, you're going to do what's easier. So, again, I think from a business perspective, from an individual personal goal, we've got to figure out how to adapt constantly, and we've got to figure out how to be efficient, because again, we are going to get to the point where we've got to decide between time and money.
Mhm.
That's kind of an efficiency question, really. I mean, most people want to get, the biggest bang for the buck. And, how do I spend the least, whatever that might be, amount of time and get the most amount of money? There's nothing wrong with thinking that way.
Not at all. And I think, the one thing that people who haven't been in leadership enough, it's one thing to, I was a team leader and I did this and I did that. But like when you have, let's say, P&L responsibility, something that, is a big responsibility, um, you're managing scarce resources. You're
Yeah.
managing, and the scarcest resources we have in business standard, are across all businesses are time and money. But there are all kinds of other resources we have to manage through. It might be, here's how many trucks we have available, and this is the amount I can ship at any given time. I can't ship any more than that. This is how much warehouse space we have available. This is, how many orders that we can fulfill to, because our vendor will only accept so much on their shelves. So there are so many different things that we have to manage from a scarce resource standpoint, that it's not just about, you know, efficiency for the sake of being more profitable. It's about efficiency for the sake of managing the critical resources that we will never have enough of. And I
Yeah.
think that is really where the challenge is. That people always think is like, oh, being efficient is you're just trying to eke more profits out. And some people are, but that's really not the game. The game is, I only have so much money. I only have so much time. I only have so much patience. I only have so much, in the world of marketing, attention that I can capture from someone's mindset. So, what am I going to do with the little bit of that resource, that allocation that I have available to me, and how can I maximize that? And that is really the crux of trying to be efficient. But that is why we need to think very carefully before we just waste stuff. It's because when we don't stop and think, when we don't take the time to kind of reflect and say, okay, I only have so much of someone's attention. How am I going to capture that? And what am I going to say with that economy of time that I have to capture their attention? And that requires a little bit of silence, a little bit of solitude, a little bit of thinking, and planning and aiming before we start just taking action. Because when we just take action broadly, we waste and scatter all those precious resources that we can't easily get more of.
Yeah, and you're making me think, Jim, this watch, has a function of body battery, you know, well, how much is in your tank? And it's pretty, I'm finding it's pretty accurate, and part of this is, the other thing that's finite is our energy.
Mhm.
And sometimes the doing nothing is what fills the tank, recharges the batteries. And, you and I both see every single day, people are stressed out, they're burned out, they're overwhelmed. A lot of people are not okay. I mean, right now, the big thing is the ice bucket challenge for mental health. What it wouldn't be a thing if everybody, was feeling great. And gosh, 10 years ago, the stats were 1 out of 5 people are experiencing some issue with mental health, and 1 out of 4 people have somebody in their family dealing with it right now. I'm guessing those numbers are way higher
Mhm.
now than they were before. But part of this is can feel really selfish. I would say that's the thing that you've got to kind of get back to is you got to lead yourself. You got to take care of yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever that might be, so that you can give, so that you can serve, so that you can fulfill, the obligations you have and, derive purpose and meaning from things. But, again, I just think it's really important. And, when I go on these and I realize I hadn't done them in a long time, really taking the time to do nothing, I realize, man, it's a reminder. I mean, this is not a once in a while thing. This needs to be regular, that
Mhm.
we schedule that time. And as we all know, the firefighting will fill up your calendar automatically. The only way you're going to do nothing, unfortunately, is Joe McCormick said in Quiet, was you have to schedule quiet time. It's
Yeah.
not going to appear on your calendar. You have to schedule it and you have to hold it sacred.
Yeah. He talked
So,
about getting those little 1 minute timers.
oh yeah, you got it. A
I did.
purple. Very nice.
I love it.
Let me have you give us a closing thought. What you kind of take away from this, and then, if you could wrap with one of your great quotes, I think that would make for a good show.
Yeah. I think if you take a look at this throughout the history of time, and you look at, great leaders that have been lionized, whether they're in religious texts or just historical, The concept of them going away for a while and thinking and then coming back with their best thoughts is not uncommon.
Yeah.
It is common across all cultures. And I think there's something to be said for things that we continue to talk about 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years later. And so I think everyone should be mindful that make some time, because if you don't take the time and make the time to check out, you'll never understand what value you're missing. And once you've done it a couple times, and that's what I've learned on your crucibles, you realize the value in doing that intentionally. So I encourage everyone to do it intentionally. If you want any more information about Jan and I, you can find it at theleadershippodcast.com. Hopefully you like the Jim and Jan episodes. If there's a topic you want us to cover, let us know. We love feedback from people. You can find us on social media. You know, maybe by now that we're doing a lot of these episodes on YouTube, so we're putting them out on YouTube as well. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And hey, let me throw a shout out to probably our 3 most avid listeners. And I'm just going to call them by their first names. Jim, Mark, and Yasna.
Yeah.
Let me say thank you to you 3. You guys always are spreading the word, so we appreciate it, especially to you 3.
Absolutely. And remember, loneliness is the poverty of self. Solitude is the richness of self. May Sarton. That's a wrap.
Thanks for listening to the Leadership Podcast. To listen to more shows or to access the books and content discussed on this show, be sure to visit theleadershippodcast.com. The material in this podcast is copyright by Rofke Advisors and Self-Reliant Leadership and must have written approval before commercial application.